cry. You're gonna make me cry. Hey, you're gonna be back.
High five. Hey.
What the? Oh my God! What the heck?
Welcome back to That's Life with John Carver. My guest today is Zach Tomlin. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you,
Appreciate
John.
it.
Always a pleasure.
You bet. Zach and I met several years ago. I am not techie at all. In fact, when something technical happens, man, my blood pressure goes up, my heart rate goes up, I freak out, I panic. So when occasionally I have some hiccups with my computer and the internet and all the other technical stuff, I call this guy. And he has bailed me out of more implosions technically than I can tell you. But that's not why we're here really today. We're here today to talk about dads. And I think us dads, we are not, at least some of us are not valued in society like other dads might be, and especially single dads. And that's the big picture today in this show. So Zach, if you could kind of share a bit about who you are so that they know a little bit about what I know about your journey.
Sure. So I'm 33 years old. I was married for 3 years, got married at 26, unfortunately divorced. That's unfortunately almost the norm nowadays, but I have two wonderful children, a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm also a very active member of the community.
Speak up a little bit more.
Sure.
Now, talk to me about how you met your wife and the evolution there, and how as a single dad, because having a spouse, it makes things a lot easier when you can share duties.
Absolutely.
So you have, at least part-time, these duties that's all on you, that plus owning a business, plus wearing a lot of other hats. How has that all evolved over the years?
Well, I'll start with your first question. It's kind of funny. I met my wife, we only courted for a very short period of time before we got married. She was in the Navy. So I met her, she came home, we got married very quickly, and things kind of escalated. We had my first son very shortly after we got married, and then about 3 months later, I found out she was pregnant with my second son. So that's how I met her. As far as juggling everything, that's really probably the most problematic task that I have. But basically, I depend on the support of my mother, my grandmother to help me with the kids, which is amazing. I'm so incredibly grateful for that. A lot of people don't have that support system, and for me to have that, I feel very blessed. I also have some amazing coworkers and a business partner that keeps things running when I have to step out of the office to do things like pick up my kids when they're sick, or go to a PTA meeting or anything of that nature. So that really helps. When it comes to the community, I feel like that is kind of part of my responsibility as a father. I grew up here, and I want to make sure that this community is a great place for my kids to grow up. So I'm doing the best I can to get out there and try to make a difference in whatever little way I can, and hopefully that'll they'll see that, so they'll get to see the way that I feel a man should act and give back to the community, and they'll also have something. So when it's their time to come of age, they'll have hopefully a wonderful community.
So if you were to describe the relationship that you and your ex-wife have as it relates to just you two and then involving the children in that mix, because with some marriages that have busted up, either side, the husband or the wife, they paint an image of the other spouse as this devil and this evil person in the kids' minds, and then that creates a very difficult relationship with the spouse that only gets them part-time. So can you kind of share what that looks like, if you don't mind, in your own situation and how that has impacted the kids positively or negatively?
Absolutely. We have a very interesting relationship, a dynamic between me and my ex-wife. Sometimes everything's wonderful, and then things happen, and we have a period of time when we don't get along very well. I absolutely agree with what you said. In situations like that, you got to do your absolute best to make sure that the children don't see that. You don't want to paint the other person in a negative light. That's not in the children's best interests. You also, in my experience and my belief, I actually try to uplift their mother and highlight, her positive attributes. The thing that's difficult is that me and my ex-wife have completely different personalities. They conflict in so many different ways, hence why we didn't work out. So when you're trying to co-parent, it becomes difficult because there's one way and there's another way. And I'm not saying that one way is particularly right or one way is wrong, but you guys got to have to try to find a middle ground. And that's not always easy in my situation. I wish it was a little bit easier. And, we've made progress throughout the years. Hopefully we'll continue to make progress, but, you always have those step backs and then hopefully leap forward. But when it comes to how it affects the kids, they love their mom. They absolutely do. They love their mom and they love their dad. So you have to do your best to, make sure that they, have that positive image.
If you know Zach, which obviously you don't, he is crazy about his kids. I see his posts, and I don't even know how to describe in adjectives the way he feels about his kids, like all of us do who are dads. At least most of us love our kids like crazy. The bond that Zach has with his boys is very, very tight. They're best buddies, they're best friends, and just watching him interact with his kids, and I'm only talking online because I don't know if I may have met his kids once, and it's not been lately, but just watching him online interact with his kids, it's pretty powerful stuff. So when you know of other dads who are placed in a situation where they are raising their kids either full-time or part-time, how important is it in your mind to have, this is a dumb question, I know, but some dads, some of us guys, we're supposed to be the strong silent type, because men are dads and dads are men. I get that. But that's not your style. That is, I mean, and I don't mean to put you down on camera, but,
no, please.
But you're a big kid. And those of us who understand how kids operate, kids are attracted to dads who like to have fun.
Right.
And can you kind of share some advice on why, in your own mind, in your own home, why that seems to be attractive to your two kids?
Yeah, well, I mean, if anybody's familiar with the laws of attraction, like energy attracts like energy. And if you know kids, they're a ball of energy. They're so creative. Their minds are not limited by anything. That as you grow up, you become a little cynical, and all of a sudden there's limitations on what you can do. But as a child, there is none. And it's great for me because, when I'm hanging out with my boys, I feel like there are no limitations, so I get down and I play Legos, or we play video games, and which is the coolest thing ever. So they got a new Zelda game out, and it's the coolest thing because they're not to the point where they can actually play themselves, but they will watch me play, and they get so into Zelda, and it's like so cool because like that's the game that I played when I was young. But you gotta enjoy your kids, really spend time with them. When it comes to being, like you said, the strong, silent type, I think it's time for society to do away with all that. Gender roles in this day and age kind of I don't believe in them anymore as far as, the woman needs to be the nurturer and the father needs to be the provider. I think the roles can flip. I think in most situations you should share the responsibilities. I know many people, and I'm not putting anybody down, but the older generation where the men are like, I never changed a diaper. Well, me, I was the first one to change the diaper for both of my kids, and I was proud to do that, So I don't have any shame in being the nurturer, and I'm not saying that my ex-wife isn't nurturing as well, but that's gender roles are irrelevant, and if you worry about, I actually read a post one of my friends made on Facebook. And he made a very good point. He said, if you're worried about coming off as being emasculine or, weak, then you kind of are. Because then you care what other people think about you. But doing yourself and being who you are is actually so much stronger than conforming to what people feel like you should be.
In my business, I've been in the insurance business for about 28 years, and I've been in thousands of people's homes. And a percentage of those homes are raised, or the kids in there are raised by single moms. And the American culture since the 1960s, in some demographics, have discouraged dads to be part of their child's life from a financial point of view. And that's another show for another day. But if you could share with us how important it is for the dads to be part of kids' lives and what that relationship can do for the child.
Absolutely. I actually brought some statistics along just to verify this point. And just to point out, there is no gender bashing when it comes to what we're speaking about. I love single mothers. I have so much respect for single mothers, and I know that there are situations that, there are situations where men don't step up, just like there are situations where women don't step up. So, I'm highlighting fathers because that's what I am. But we're going to talk about this a little bit. In 2014, 23.6% of U.S. children lived in father-absent homes. That's 17.4 million children. And a study conducted in Florida found that the absence of fathers increased the risk of infant mortality by 4 times within the first 28 days of their lives.
Wow.
Think about that for a second.
That's crazy.
The absence of a father in this study showed that a child is 4 times more likely to die in the first 28 days of their lives than a child that has a father present. I thought that was very powerful. Another study showed that individuals from father-absent homes were found to be nearly 300% more likely to legally carry guns and deal drugs than their peers that had their fathers present. Father involvement is relative to positive cognitive development and social behavioral outcomes, higher receptive language skills, and higher academic achievements. There's some other statistics from Ocala.com. 72% of adolescent murderers grew up without fathers.
Repeat that again, please.
72% of adolescent murderers grew up without fathers.
That's amazing.
The same is true for 60% of all rapists.
Really?
Yes, according to this study. 70% of juveniles in state institutions grew up in a single parent or no parent situation. The number of single parent households is a good predictor of violent crime in a community, while poverty is not.
That's amazing.
That is powerful. So about 40% of children in fatherless homes have not seen their dads in a year or more. And I don't know how you do that, John. I mean, you're a father. I can barely go without my kids. I have them week on, week off, and I can barely go without them for a week.
Yeah, I can relate. It's for a dad who really cares about their kids. It's our lives. I mean, our kids are our lives. It's why we breathe every day. So what you just read, at least a piece of what you just read, that certain crimes are dramatic or happen more dramatically to the younger or by the younger people when there's no dads in the house. So in a very simplified analogy, if there were more active dads in young people's lives, by that result, by that study, the crime rate in America would literally drop in more than half.
Amen.
If dads were more active or involved or lived with or married the mother of the child, it would dramatically change the American culture, which would save, in a financial sense, hundreds of billions of dollars in incarcerations and other legal aspects about that, so, which kind of melds into this next piece of the conversation. And that is, what do you think contributes at least part of the time to absentee fathers? What ingredients makes up a portion of that?
Well, I'll start by saying that, both men and women, some aren't just cut out to be parents. They're selfish. They, want to do their own thing. Unfortunately, nowadays, we have such a huge drug epidemic that, that can cause problems. But in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I don't have any stats to back it up, but the legal system and how family law is so broken contributes dramatically to how fathers leave, or they're not involved. Like, let's take child support, for example. Child support is a broken system for many reasons. One thing that I can say about child support is that when you are ordered to pay a certain amount of money for child support and you're not making a large amount of money, you have to work overtime just to meet those obligations. Well, if you're working, you can't be spending time with your child. That's not in the child's best interest. I've also seen, I actually fought for primary custody of my children, and that's a long story, but that process was so long, lengthy, exhausting. At some point in time, if you're not an incredibly strong person, you're just going to give in and you're going to concede. And it's really sad. And it came to a point where I ran out of money. I really honestly felt like I needed to do this to protect my children. I had some legitimate concerns, and I ran out of money. I don't think that anybody, mother or father, should have to go into debt or not be able to afford to protect their children. I think that is absolutely ridiculous, and I think that the government should do something to help when there is some serious stuff going down, because when you are paying money and you run out and therefore your children are left in horrible situations, that's not in the child's best interest. But it's a profit motive there.
Is it fair to say in your world that society and or the courts more times than not assume that the mother has the best well-being of the child in mind, when at times it's a financial goal behind that? Whereas the courts their tendency is not to look at the stability of the father and or the strengths of the father, and more importantly, the value of the father in the kids' lives. So again, the broader question is, why do you think society or the courts assume that the mother always has and should have the primary custody of the child? Now, again, I'm not saying that either side is right or wrong. I'm just trying to figure out in this conversation, why do you think society leans more towards the moms than the dads?
I think in society as men, for the most part, I was raised by very strong women, very strong male figures as well. But as society, I was always taught to protect women. That's what you do. And we've seen so many incidences where, men are abusing women and, men aren't taking care of their kids and things like that. So we see that and we want to protect women. So in my example, when we went into a settlement conference, at that point in time, I actually had my children more frequently than my ex-wife. But we go into the settlement conference. She had an attorney that was pro bono. It was just me. I'm not really sure how she got that pro bono attorney, but nothing was offered to me. There were 2 attorneys sitting at the settlement conference. I was pretty intimidated because I'm an IT guy. I don't speak legalese, and at the time I was a much younger man. I'm not old, but so when we went in there and I sat down, they started talking and they looked at me. Both these attorneys looked at me, and the one said, "So you're not paying child support?" And this was before any court or anything. And I kind of looked at the guy and I said, "No, I didn't know I was supposed to. I was never ordered to. And right now, as it stands, I've had more physical custody of the children." He kind of gave me a bad look, and they kind of were kind of vicious towards me. And that's when I had to take a stand and say, "Hey, look, I'm not a deadbeat father. I have been there since day one of my children's birth. I have woke up in the middle of the night more frequently and fed them, and then woke up at 6 in the morning to go to work to provide for them. I get home exhausted. I get on the floor and play with them. I read parenting books. I love my children and my stepson. I've done so much for my stepson. So you're not going to treat me like I'm some deadbeat father off the street." And as soon as I kind of said that and I took my stand, they kind of backed off. But it's sad because, and I was well dressed when I went in there. There was nothing to say, "Hey, this guy is not legit or on the level." But I walked in, and I'm the man, so they came at me.
Right.
And that's just one instance of how the court system's unfair. I pay child support. I have my kids 50% of the time. My ex-wife has a college degree. At one point in time, she had top secret military clearance. She had the capability of making a lot of money. At one point in time, she was offered a job making around $50,000, $60,000 a year, which was double what I was making at the time. She went for one day and quit. Now, she has the same income potential. Well, like back then she did. I hustle a lot. I'm very ambitious. But so they made me pay child support, and they still do, to her when I have just as much financial responsibility when they're with me than when they're with her. Even more so, John, because right now, and I'm happy for her, but she has a fiance and she's about to get married, so she lives with him. I don't know how much money he makes, it's none of my business, but I know that he does okay. And so that raises the household income quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So I'm making X amount of dollars, and I have to pay for all the living expenses on my own and take care of the boys. She has somebody to help her take care of, and I know it's not his responsibility to, pay for our children. I know that. But at the same time, the things they share, like rent, utilities, and things of that nature, she gets help with. So their household income could be double my household income, but I am still paying $200 a month, and that's not a lot, but you got to remember, I have my kids a lot, to her. And that income doesn't get counted in to the child support. So say somebody's making $3,000 and somebody's making $2,800, and they say, okay, well, you got to pay $300 a month in child support. Okay, so all of a sudden, the person that was making 28 is making 31, really, but they don't count that. So they're making more than you now because of child support.
Right.
And then they don't count the child support from any previous relationships, which, is another $600.
That's not fair, is it?
It's not fair at all.
No,
it's
double
not
standard,
fair.
really.
It is. And so they need to, in my opinion, they need to account for the expenses that we have, both of us, and the income. And they should definitely, if you can go in to a lender and you can claim child support as income, to get a mortgage, then you should absolutely have to claim that when you're going in to ask for child support. It's not just that money that's a financial burden, but think about it like this. Renting is more expensive. If you're getting like a house for $160,000, renting is more expensive than owning your own home.
For sure.
So by paying child support, it harms your debt-to-income ratio. That's nothing you can do about it.
This is a deep subject, and we're out of time today. But Zach, I want to thank you again for stopping
John,
in
thank
today.
you
It's been
so
a whole
very
lot.
much.
Thanks a lot.
I
This
really
is
appreciate
a great
it.
subject, and I hope some of this information helped you dads that are single, raising children, either part-time or full-time. Maybe some tips that Zach shared that can help you too. So again, thanks for watching That's Life with John Carver, and we'll be back again real soon.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.